was a lad, I lived in a place without a game store, and by the time I moved out, online storefronts were only just starting to become a thing. But I wasn't at a loss for things to play because I had Half-Life, and since I had Half-Life, I had access to hundreds of quality games that were all available for free online. Unlike the actual games the companies put out for money, those were only available in stores. The landscape of Half-Life modding has kind of been forgotten. Game engines have become so cheap to license that some of them don't even cost money at all, and the tools available are so easy that even children can use them to make games now. While I think it's lovely that the game development process has been democratized and smaller creators can now make a living off of what they love, I do think that gaming as a whole has become very trend-chasing, especially horror games. Like, there's two kinds of horror games now, and that kind of sucks. But here's the thing. While we don't really get any new mods anymore, the ones that we do have are still available, and they hold up incredibly well. And due to horror as a genre moving as fast as it does and always changing trends, the spooky mods that dominate the Half-Life modding scene feel incredibly fresh with their speedier gameplay and emphasis on fast gunplay over the modern take of sluggish combat. And the graphics and sound design is amazing. The sounds are crunchy and raw, and there is a charm to the 3D visuals that consist of geometrically simple objects with equally simple textures, and the usage of JPEGs and PNGs of real photographs as backgrounds and sometimes even objects. It's raw and it's unnerving and it's scary. Welcome back to Underrated PC Horror Games, a series where we look at spooky games that time kind of forgot. Last we looked at a bunch of gold source games that were all available for free, and today we're gonna look at another 5 absolute gems because in the last video I was holding back on you. And let's have a look at what I've been holding back on. And I can think of no better place to start than with the OG critically acclaimed Half-Life mod, They Hunger. Developed and published by the elusive Black Widow Games, They Hunger is set in the 50s as a Romero-esque plague seems to be sweeping the land. But you could be fooled for thinking that it's not the 50s, as there is a 90s era PC Gamer magazine right next to the radio broadcaster in the game's opening cinematic. The reason for that, and the other PC Gamer advertising, will be the topic of another video, so just ignore it for now. We play as a man that cruises through the landscape in a swanky car, and then for whatever reason we skid off the road and into a lake, and then the game begins. From here on out it's a trek through hell, as we first escape our sunken car and then find ourselves in a church graveyard. We enter the church itself and find out that everyone is dead. As we come to this realization, the dead rise from their grave, and equipped with only an umbrella, we begin finding our way through them. I think it's brilliant touch here in the beginning that the opening chapter that we play through is just us spending 30 minutes trying to make our way back to where our car started in the opening cinematic and retracing that 1-minute journey. It's a nice reminder of just how much havoc the zombie apocalypse has wreaked upon the world in mere minutes, and it keeps you engaged when you see those familiar sights again that were just unruined just moments ago. Combat from here till we make it to where we started is fairly straightforward, and it's not the show stealer of the game. We'll be fighting a lot of lone zombies that lurk around corners, and it's clear that the game is going easy on us, so that we have a chance to acquaint ourselves with the reach of the umbrella, as well as get to know the zombies' patterns, where they typically hide, how long their reach is, and what their wind-up animation looks like. And as with any good Half-Life 1 mod, before it ever gets boring, we come across more weapons and face even more varied enemies. The zombies are joined by headcrabs that in this universe are apparently mutated cats, and also talking lady zombies that very fuckingly unnervingly say bullshit like this. And that absolutely made me jump out of my seat the first time I heard it. But we're not just fighting zombies, headcrabs and the come to mommy zombies, there are also people here, and they aren't nice. The Hunger has a flair for the dramatic. It knows how to set a scene, it knows how to get a reaction from the player, it knows good level design, and in no place is that more obvious than our first encounter with the police officer. We've so far had brief interactions with other humans, and they have been nothing but friendly, so it was natural to just approach a cop and say, "Hey, what's up?" But psych, just like in real life, all cops are bastards, and these are some mean fucking ones. He turns around and is clearly possessed or something, and the very first time I approached one of these, he shot me in the face and I died. It was such a good scare because while it is a jump scare, it is completely earned. And it's when the cops show up as enemies that the game really comes together. Every area becomes this brilliant exam for you as the player to prove that you have mastered the skills that the game has taught you up until now. Every area usually forces you to get into a compromising situation where you are either exposed to gunfire from the police officers or close range damage from the zombies. And I don't think I can properly convey how well this is handled and how many incredibly immersive and intense moments that it creates in the game. There is something magical about having a group of zombies chase you while you sprint into a courtyard where you have memorized where 5 cops are hiding and popping off headshots and taking them down with 5 perfectly lined shots in 5 perfectly timed seconds and making your way to the next area. And it's a boss-ass feeling when you shoot down a helicopter pilot and the whole helicopter just goes down. Or when you jump on a train and make it drive forwards while an army of zombies are chasing you and a gang of cops are firing at you from a distance. Or running through a swamp and luring a sea monster to the surface so that you can shoot it in the face. There is no dull moment in this game. There's no point where you don't know what you're supposed to do. There's also no moment where you are sure to expect, mostly. I did get stuck one point in a level early on, and being a Half-Life vet, I just clipped out of bounds and found what I thought was a secret area full of ammo, but I actually just managed to find an area of the level where I would be passing by later on, and then when I went back where I started, I then figured out the solution to the problem, because sometimes you just need to approach things from a different angle, sometimes metaphorically, or sometimes literally like here. But if the engaging moment-to-moment gameplay isn't enough to keep you engaged, there is also a story here that of course involves these possessed cops and what they're up to, and it picks up quite a bit more in chapters 2 and 3, and it's a solid narrative to support a solid game, and I'm still blown away by how good this thing is and how well it plays given that it came out in 1999.
You just committed suicide, boy.
Fresh meat.
Why do we hunger?
Released in 2011, the trap is essentially what would happen if Portal was made in the Gold Cells engine, but without the portal gun. You're some sort of lab rat in a secret underground bunker, and you must make your way through a series of increasingly difficult hazard courses. It starts out easy enough with just some light jumping puzzles, but 4 levels in, you're gonna find yourself scratching your head at some of the puzzles present here. Even though graphically the game looks just like a souped up Half-Life 1 with some extremely pretty textures, there is a lot going on under the hood, and a lot of new gameplay mechanics have been added. Unfortunately for the Trap's marketing, it's a game that is incredibly hard to talk about in a way that makes the game seem fun, and it's in general a game that's hard to talk about, period. It's got that Pac-Man thing where you can explain what it is mechanically and technically, but you can't put into words why it pleases your lizard brain so much. But it does, and you should play it. And then we're back in the loving embrace of Black Widow games. I didn't actually know this was a Black Widow game, as I prior to making this list didn't know that Black Widow Games was a studio that existed. But they are, or rather were, but that's a tale for another day. What is here is the game. Released in 1999, USS Darkstar stars Gordon Freeman of all people as he's aboard the zoological research ship the USS Darkstar, a spaceship doing testing on the alien life forms we saw in Half-Life 1. The most interesting thing about this setting is that it's obviously a pre-Half-Life 2 mod, as it takes place, I assume, after the events of Half-Life 1, when we didn't know what the follow-up to that game would look like, and modders as a result took it upon themselves to guess. And what they guessed was that Gordon Freeman would go on a series of adventures and still work for Black Mesa or some other type of corporation with a similar purpose. Coming up with this kind of scenario as a follow-up to Half-Life 1 was really common back then, and it's odd seeing this kind of pre-9/11 optimism because it feels so quaint. In true Half-Life 1 fashion, something goes wrong. If you're eagle-eyed, you will have noticed that the game shares a certain visual similarity to the 1979 movie Alien. And just like in that one, something happens on a mission and someone is taken to the sickbay, and then shortly thereafter, a headcrab bursts through their chest. In a mashup of Half-Life and Alien, what happens next is a mix of both. The doctor in the room turns on the fire suppression system, and it unfortunately creates a ripple effect that damages critical systems aboard the ship, letting out all the dangerous aliens that are being studied aboard the Darkstar. And we must then make our way to the ship's escape pod. And to do so, we must traverse the now broken ship, murdering droves of aliens, as well as creatures straight out of Alien the movie. And if you're a fan of Alien Resurrection, I can happily report that the game features a large section set underwater, and it's just as pants-shittingly terrifying as the one in that movie. At first, I didn't know what to make of Mistake. It seemed like most other Russian-made Half-Life horror mods that I had looked at so far. Dark as shit, slow to start, loud in exposition, and definitely not something that piqued my interest due to its oversaturation. But then no monsters came at me, which was new, and instead there was platforming in my way, keeping me from going where I wanted to go. The barriers around the levels seemed kind of familiar, like I felt like I knew them, I just couldn't place them. I was beginning to think that the whole thing was just platforming and puzzle solving, and thought that a monsterless Russian Half-Life horror mod would be a refreshing idea. But then I found a gun, which confirmed that something was definitely gonna jump out at me. And then it did, and then it made the most unsettling zombie noise I have ever heard in one of these mods. Which is impressive because Half-Life mods are infamous for their unsettling zombie noises. I figured I had the game packed at this point, but then the noise came and the visuals changed. I was now in the other worlds, the broken dimension from the first and third Silent Hill. I was in Russian Silent Hill. I was in Molashi home, and that's where I had seen the barriers from earlier before. That's why they were so familiar. And that's what Mistake is. It's Molashi home, and that's a compliment. You navigate the dark hallways of a mental hospital where the staff and your fellow patients have all been mauled to death by creatures that walk both planes of existence. And to figure out what happened and find your way out, you have to walk those two planes as well. The real world consists of a few scattered monsters and features most of the puzzles and notes and the clues that the narrative is told through. And the other world sections is where the combat happens, as well as the most of the dangerous platforming. It's a good combination. You're never quite at ease because you always have that sound of the siren in the back of your mind, and you're always fearing for a quick second that whenever you hear any sound, that sound is gonna be that sound that transports you to the overworld, which is really fucking bad if you're low on ammo, weapons or health. It's a very simple way to create tension, but it absolutely works. And now on to a game that I didn't think I would feature, but couldn't be more fitting. We started part 1 with Afraid of Monsters, the debut game of one Andreas Rönnberg.
No, ow, I'm dead, yep.
And it makes so much sense to cap off part 2 with his follow-up, Cry of Fear. I just didn't think that I would feature it because up until a few years ago, I didn't actually know that it was a gold source mod. I had played the mod and I had enjoyed it, but I was completely sure that it was a source mod, and the poster in the protagonist's bedroom, well, it also seemed to indicate that. But it's not. It's a Half-Life mod, and it's the most impressive mod that I have ever seen. It opens with a multi-camera shot cutscene that, to my knowledge, shouldn't be possible. It looks masterful and it rivals that of good Half-Life 2 mods. I'd always thought of this as an updated remake of Afraid of Monsters in a new engine, and it is partly that, just sans the new engine. The game opens as Simon, our protagonist, is heading from somewhere, going somewhere else. He gets off the train he's on and continues his journey on foot. On his way he comes across someone lying in the street, but when he goes to check on them if they're okay, he hears a car, and then as he looks up, the car comes crashing towards him, and then the screen fades to black. Simon wakes up in a house, armed with only a camera. White markings can be seen around him, and as he photographs them, they reveal the path forward, but also more horrifying, corpses of people that seem to have been killed in horrible ways. He's attacked by a giant floating head, and then he wakes up in an alley, armed with only a knife and a cryptic text message beckoning him to come meet them. Simon begins making his way through the dimly lit streets of Stockholm in search of answers. And this is where the game begins, proper. It's one of those games that when gameplay is described, it sounds like shit, because it sounds like one of those where the fuck do I go kind of games, where you find yourself searching every nook and cranny for some bullshit key to some bullshit door, but it works here. The first obstacle between us and the mysterious text writer is a padlock with a code on, and we need to find the code. We begin looking around and we find ourselves in a square. The level naturally guides our eyes with its design, so we quickly find a note with a message and then another note with another message. Inside a bar there is a computer, and on the screen is a company name that makes up half the message of the first note. It's clear that the notes we picked up are an account name and a password, and typing both into a computer reveals another note, and the note is a code, and the code opens the padlock, and that's pretty much the loop. Its symbol seems annoying, but it really works. And it gets more interesting from here, or rather, spooky. We find the apartment building we're searching for, and then we learn that the person we're here to find is on the 4th floor, and while making our way there, we learn what the knife is for. And it's for murdering creepy crawlies.
What the hell? Who was he?
And they are even more painstakingly terrifying than the one in Andreas' last mod, Afraid of Monsters. Afraid of Monsters was actually on my mind a lot while playing. Like I said in the beginning, it's kind of a remake of that mod, and where Afraid of Monsters would at points blatantly rip off its inspirations, such as featuring levels straight out of Silent Hill and Resident Evil, Cry of Fear finds a balance and has nods to its inspirations, like the dilapidations of buildings, the horrible sounds the enemies make, and even little Easter eggs like an item being on the other side of the gate, tempting you to reach out. It's done in a very professional and downplayed way, and it makes you chuckle with the game, unlike the previous one where you were at times laughing at it for its scuffed versions of famous locales. But also, like Afraid of Monsters, it's pants-shittingly terrifying, and the extreme sense of unease I felt while I played through that game originally returned in full force as I crept through the halls of the apartment building. Gone are the obvious monster closets from the first game, and in are monsters literally bursting through walls and out of apartments, and heard screaming from floors below you and screeching while they sprint up the stairs to rip you apart. It's tense, and it makes the otherwise straightforward experience of finding the open door that takes you to another part of the apartment building, which has another door to lead you further along the path, very scary. You won't ever want to enter any room that the game requires you to enter, and it knows this, and it does a nice job of alternating between putting monsters right in front of you, letting you decide how to approach, and hiding them in the bathroom and not making them jump out at you until you've already entered the room the bathroom is connected to and looked around for a bit. And you're never comfortable at any given fucking moment doing anything in this game, and that's what you want from a horror game. It is sort of infamous for having an edgelordy story that tries and fails hard to do meaningful things with the subject matter it deals with. And in comparison, the very straightforward narrative of Afraid of Monsters is a lot more competent in its storytelling. But that doesn't make Cry of Fear any worth less exploring and playing. You just have to accept that it's a very old game written by an, at the time, fairly young man. And I think it does alright given those obstacles. And I personally enjoy the story, and I found the edgelordy elements of it very endearing, because it reminded me of the time the game was made in. It's a game that is very much worth playing, and I couldn't think of any better way to cap off my adventures into the world of Half-Life mods. And that was a look at 5 fantastic Gold Source horror mods that are all available completely for free. While they are all fantastic and worth playing, I do have a recommendation. The trap is great, and I think its twist on the Half-Life formula is brilliant, and I wish more mods had focused on expanding the Hazard Course gameplay. The USS Darkstar is a solid adventure if you want more Half-Life action. Mistake is great and a fun take on Silent Hill, but Russian. And Cry of Fear is the most impressive Half-Life mod I have ever played, to the point that I didn't know it was one, like I mentioned earlier. It has multiple camera cutscenes, an open world design, dual wielding custom animations, textures and models that are as high-res as Half-Life 2, and you literally cannot tell that it is a Half-Life mod, sans the signature loading screen when entering the game. But They Hunger is a fantastic love letter to 50s horror movies and George Romero. It has an incredibly campy story, and its level design is not afraid to get stupid, and it's not afraid to put a lot of vehicles and explosions and whatnot in the game, despite how laughable those can look at times. It is without a doubt the game that I've had the most fun with, and there is a reason that it's the one I've kept coming back to for over 20 years. And the reason for that is, it's fun. Full stop. And that's why it gets my recommendations out of the 5 games that we've looked at. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you play some of the games I recommended. As always, let me know if you have any favorite Gold Source mods of your own, or more importantly, if you know of any good free horror games, because I think non-Half-Life mod horror will be the next topic of one of these. But until I see you again, this has been it for me, so good night.